Hello, and welcome to Boring History for Sleep. Before we drift into the past together, I like to ask, what time is it where you are right now? Take a moment to notice the hour, the light in your room, maybe even the quiet hum of a late-night clock. Settle in, make yourself comfortable, and let your mind unwind as we step into a world defined as much by its stench as by its stones. Imagine a medieval city at dusk. The sky is a washed-out purple, fading into deep blue. Flickering torchlight dances across timber-framed houses, casting tall, wavering shadows onto uneven cobblestones. A cool breeze drifts through narrow streets, carrying the distant murmur of merchants packing up their stalls, the soft clatter of wooden wheels on stone, and the occasional caw of a roosting crow. Beneath it all, there's a low, unceasing gurgle, an open gutter that runs the length of the road, bearing away the city's refuse. No sealed sewer covers here. No early morning trash bins. Here, in the heart of medieval Europe, every drop of wastewater escaped into open channels, and every scrap of household waste found its way into shared middens. Tonight, we'll uncover how ordinary people coped with a world built around the management or mismanagement of human and animal waste, and how they tried, with varying success, to mask odors that would challenge even the strongest stomach. Close your eyes if you like, and picture yourself standing beside one of those gutters. You feel the rough edge of a stone curb against your hand. You hear the faint splash of liquid as it pours over a protruding rock. You might catch a whiff of something sour, something earthy, something fermented. That smell is inseparable from medieval urban life. Yet most of us now view it through the lens of curiosity rather than discomfort. Let us begin by exploring the simplest, most basic problem of all: garbage and waste disposal in a city without modern sanitation. In most medieval towns, there was no concept of taking out the trash. Families lived in cramped homes built of timber and wattle, with floors of packed earth or rough-cut stone. Each household produced food scraps, vegetable peelings, fish bones, animal entrails, and discarded broken pottery, splintered wood, and other debris. With nowhere to put it, they simply deposited their refuse in open middens. These middens, often placed behind houses or in alley corners, swelled into mounds of rot. Under the heat of the sun, organic matter fermented rapidly. Imagine heaps of cabbage leaves trapped in the midday warmth, fish heads drying in the air, and animal guts left to lie exposed. Flies descended by the thousands, laying eggs that hatched into wriggling maggots. With each passing day, the mingled odors of decay grew stronger, a mixture of sour milk and old cheese, of spoiled meat and damp earth. Medieval residents sometimes referred to it as the stench of life, a smell so pervasive it seeped through closed shutters and heavy tapestries. City authorities recognized the problem early on. Town councils would issue ordinances declaring that no one should dump waste within a certain distance of the market square or the main thoroughfares. They might fine offenders or threaten to impound animals left to roam near waste heaps. Notices were posted on church doors and read aloud by town criers. Let none deposit refuse on this side of the gate after sunset. Yet these regulations were seldom enforced strictly. Wealthier merchants might comply, relocating their refuse piles beyond the walls. Most people, however, returned to the familiar convenience of the nearest midden, trusting that a strong breeze or the coming of night would mask the worst. In winter, the problem shifted but did not disappear. When temperatures plunged below freezing, refuse heaped in middens froze solid. Garbage became a frozen mountain of waste, sealed under a crust of ice and snow. Only when early spring arrived and melting released a new wave of foul aromas did people again confront the smell. The same piles that had seemed inert months before burst into life, emitting gases and fluids in a pungent flood. Despite such hardships, medieval towns continued to expand. Craftsmen built new rows of houses. Guild halls rose above the city's core. Markets bustled with trade. All the while, Middens grew in gutters, carried off human waste in a continuous flow. The people of that time accepted these conditions as normal, part of the everyday backdrop of life. Now that we've seen the origins of the city's stench, we will move on to how people relieve themselves and how those actions shaped the very foundations of medieval homes. But before we continue, take another slow breath. Notice the rustle of your clothes or the soft rhythm of your breathing, and prepare to step deeper into the alleys of a long-vanished world. In most medieval homes, there was no separate bathroom as we know it today. Instead, families kept one or more simple chamber pots, clay bowls, wooden buckets, or metal basins beside the bed or tucked under a bench. When nature called, the contents were discreetly deposited into these vessels. At dawn, a child or servant lifted each heavy pot and carried it through twisting alleyways to the nearest gutter or refuse pile. You can almost feel the weight of that ceramic bowl in your hands, slick with condensation and residue, as you step onto uneven cobblestone strewn with straw. Every corner brought a sharper whiff of ammonia and something far earthier, a stark reminder of life's most basic functions. Wealthier households and castles attempted something more private, the garderobe. This was a seat, usually of wood, built into an outer wall, often jutting over a moat, courtyard, or a deep stone-lined pit. A simple hole in the seat dropped waste into the shaft below. Day after day, the garderobe collected human refuse, and its lower reaches filled with solids and liquids alike. In winter, the rim of the pit froze over, trapping everything until spring thaws released it in one fetid rush. During heavy rains, water washed the contents back up toward living quarters, seeping through floorboards and dripping into cellars. When cesspits overflowed or became too noxious, medieval towns turned to night soil collectors. These workers, among the lowest in social status, descended into foul-smelling pits by lantern light or torch. Armed with long wooden hooks, metal scrapers, and crude shovels, they scraped hardened sludge from pit walls, loaded buckets to the brim, and hauled them up narrow ladders. The air in those shafts would have been oppressive, choked with gases like methane and hydrogen sulfide, sometimes snuffing out their lamps. Once filled, the buckets were transferred to barrels or carts, and the collectors trundled their heavy loads through silent streets before dawn, bound for fields beyond the city walls. Farmers paid handsomely for this night soil, for human excrement made a potent fertilizer. In open fields, it was spread over poor earth to enrich grain and vegetable plots. Yet every cycle of removal carried risk. Heavy rains loosened the sides of pits, collapsing surrounding earth into foundations and wells. Wells dug near cesspits often tapped the same groundwater, and villagers drawing water for drinking and cooking might unknowingly ingest disease-causing bacteria. Outbreaks of dysentery and typhoid spread swiftly through towns where polluted water mingled with daily life. Official attempts to regulate privies and cesspits produced edicts that forbade digging within a certain distance of wells or churchyards. Town criers read proclamations, sometimes accompanied by graphic warnings of the penalties for violation, and notices were posted on public boards. A typical ordinance might declare, "Let no household construct or empty a privy pit nearer than 40 paces to the parish well, under penalty of 2 pence for each offense." But enforcement was lax outside the wealthiest quarters. In cramped artisans' districts, convenience trumped caution, and the familiar rhythm of chamber pot to gutter continued unabated. Even medieval elites could not escape the problem. In grand halls, guests arriving for feasts might catch a faint, sour note drifting from service passages. To counter this, hosts burned bundles of dried herbs, juniper, rosemary, sage, in braziers. Tapestries hung along walls to absorb odors, and rushes strewn on earthen floors were replaced annually in spring. Wealthy ladies kept pomanders, hollow balls of wood carved with holes and filled with spiced oils, pressed to their noses. But these measures were temporary reprieves. Beneath them lay the perpetual hum of dripping liquid and the distant echo of carts hauling away waste. Beyond the walls, rivers bore the burden of urban sanitation. When sewers or open drains carried waste downhill, it often ended up in streams or rivers people used for drinking, bathing, and laundering clothes. In summer heat, nutrient-rich sewage fueled algae blooms that turned water green and foul, killing fish and making the riverbanks reek for miles downstream. Towns upriver sometimes dug new wells, but downstream settlements had no escape. The same water, meant to sustain life, also became a vector for illness. Monastic communities approached hygiene differently. Many monasteries had latrine blocks connected to flowing water channels diverted from nearby streams. These double or triple arched halls, sometimes with wooden seats on stone benches, sat above running water that washed waste away continuously. Even so, the water frequently clogged with straw and straw-filled rushes tossed in to absorb odors. Monks performed their daily tasks in these latrine halls, some even carrying small books for reading aloud to distract from the stench. Their solutions were innovative for the time, yet remained imperfect. As you listen, imagine the endless cycle: chamber pot to gutter, gutter to pit, pit to field or river. Hear the scrape of a bucket on stone, the splintered creak of a wooden seat, the splash of liquid into black water below. Hold that image for a moment, then breathe out slowly and let the scene fade. Soon, we will explore how the legacy of Roman engineering lingered and decayed beneath medieval streets. How ancient sewers, once marvels of hydraulic design, became choked with centuries of use, and how their collapse reshaped public health in the cities of Europe. In the dim light of a flickering torch, you step away from the narrow alleys and into a half-forgotten tunnel running beneath the city's oldest quarter. This is a remnant of Rome's grand engineering. Stone-lined sewers once built to carry water and waste out of ancient settlements. Centuries later, these tunnels lay half-collapsed, choked with silt and debris. Imagine walls streaked with mineral stains, the low vaults dripped upon by centuries of moisture, and half-buried slabs that once formed smooth channels now cracked and tilted by shifting earth. Where Roman engineers had placed carefully cut stones to form nearly waterproof conduits, medieval hands had tossed broken pottery, discarded refuse, and even animal carcasses in hopes of filling gaps. Over time, the flow slowed. Gradually, sediment and rubble formed dams. Water backed up, flooded cellars, and overflowed into back streets. Villagers reported foul springs bubbling up in unexpected places, a puddle of black water beneath a baker's stall, a trickle of stinking moisture under a church doorway. In response, city officials organized sewer clearings. Teams of laborers, armed with picks and baskets, entered these tunnels at low tide, wading through knee-deep muck. Their lamps cast dancing shadows on curved walls as they chipped away at silt and hauled cartloads of heavy sediment upward. The work was dangerous. Tunnels might collapse without warning. Trapping workers in darkness or pockets of noxious gas could cause sudden suffocation. Yet these clearings were essential, for without them the city's water supply and drainage would fail altogether. Above ground, the remnants of Roman sewers shaped how towns grew. Streets followed the original channels. Buildings sprouted up across their backs, sealing off access. Merchants built over passages to expand shops. Carpenters laid floors atop tunnels to create extra rooms. Over centuries, memory faded. By the 13th century, many citizens believed the stone conduits to be natural caves or ancient catacombs. Only when sudden sinkholes swallowed livestock or collapsed beneath a horse's hooves did people remember that below their feet lay human-made drains. As sewers failed, the burden shifted to open gutters and rivers. Runoff carrying waste from privies and middens discharged directly into nearby streams. These waterways, once sources of fresh drinking water, now carried the city's filth. In summer heat, the polluted water became stagnant. Surface scum formed, turning the river green or black. Fish died by the thousands. and the air along the banks took on a sickly sweetness that masked something far more deadly. Villagers drawing water from shallow wells unknowingly tapped into this contaminated supply. Without knowledge of microscopic pathogens, they blamed miasmas, poisonous vapors thought to arise from rotting matter. Physicians recommended carrying aromatic herbs or wearing masks stuffed with fragrant flowers. Some authorities burned large braziers of turf or coal along riverbanks to purify the air. Yet these measures did little to stem the spread of disease. When the Black Death struck in 1348, it found a population weakened by poor sanitation and malnourishment. Fleas on rats carried Yersinia pestis, but waterborne illnesses like dysentery and cholera also claimed countless lives. Entire neighborhoods were abandoned. Homes were locked and windows shuttered as families perished indoors. Records speak of carts piled high with corpses, driven to mass graves outside the city walls. The acrid stench of death joined the everyday odors of waste, creating an atmosphere of despair that lingered for years. In the aftermath, some rulers attempted broader reforms. Emperor Charles IV of the Holy Roman Empire issued decrees to improve water quality and order regular sewer maintenance. In Paris, the provost of merchants directed that all new construction include access points to sewers for cleaning. London's city fathers banned dumping refuse in the Thames at certain times and established the first rudimentary system of paid sewer workers. Yet these regulations often benefited wealthier districts first. The poorest quarters remained mired in filth. Despite these grim realities, life continued. Markets reopened, guilds resumed their meetings, and children laughed once more in the streets, though always with one eye on the gutters. And so the city endured, built layer upon layer over the stones and sludge of previous ages. The stench never vanished, but the human spirit adapted, finding ways to live, love, and dream even amid the most unrelenting odors. Pause for a moment. Let the memory of dripping vaults and murky waters fade. Feel your breath settle into a steady rhythm. When you're ready, we will leave these underground halls and return to the street level to explore how medieval people sought to mask odors above ground. With herbs, incense, and vivid rituals that blended superstition and practicality in surprising ways. Now, back above ground, the air hangs heavy, but people were determined to fight the stench, however briefly, with every tool they had. The first line of defense was smoke and flame. In wealthier homes, servants stoked braziers of burning coals into which they tossed bundles of aromatic herbs: rosemary, lavender, hyssop, and juniper. The smoke spiraled upward, carrying with it a sharp, resinous scent that cut through the underlying odors. In the grand halls of manor houses, these braziers stood near service corridors, their smoke acting like a cleansing wind whenever guests passed from kitchen to dining chamber. In city streets, vendors sold small rush torches, sticks wrapped in reeds coated with tallow or beeswax and studded with sprigs of mint or balsam. A passerby might pause in front of a stall, breathe in the cool winter air mingled with the torch's fragrant smoke, and feel, for a moment, as though the city's filth had vanished. Children chased each other through alleyways, waving their torches high, trailing smoky plumes that drifted above the gutters. Personal measures were equally creative. Men and women carried pomanders, hollow balls of wood or metal intricately carved with holes, filled inside with spiced oils and dried flowers. Clutched in a hand or worn on a cord around the neck, a pomander was meant to perfume each breath. Some people greased quince paste or orris root with scented oils, rose, cinnamon, clove, and carried the paste in small boxes to press beneath their noses. Others fashioned nosegays, small bouquets tied together with ribbon, composed of rosemary, thyme, and marigold, which they inhaled discreetly when passing particularly malodorous corners. Guilds contributed their own rituals. Tanners, whose work relied on soaking hides in vats of fermented urine and lime, held a yearly purification procession. On the appointed day, members donned fresh aprons and gloves, marched through the main thoroughfare carrying censers of burning cedar shavings, and concluded at the town well, where they poured vinegar-infused water over the cobblestones. The idea was twofold: to remind townsfolk of the tanner's value and to demonstrate their mastery over the stench. Church services incorporated fragrances as well. Priests swung thuribles, metal censer bells, filled with charcoal and frankincense during important masses. The dense, sweet smoke wafted through the nave, settling on wooden pews and stone walls. Monks taught that the rising incense symbolized prayers ascending to heaven. But the practical effect was an air briefly purified of street-borne foulness. Pilgrims entering a cathedral for shelter on a cold night would find the sanctuary's scented haze a welcome respite from the city's raw odors. Even public festivals leaned into scent. During the Feast of Corpus Christi, towns suspended garlands of herbs and flowers from arches spanning the main street. As the procession passed beneath, parishioners believed the greenery released protective spirits and warded off disease. Beneath the garlands, floats bore representations of the Virgin Mary and saints said to cleanse the city. While these ceremonies were rooted in faith, they also harnessed the simple power of fresh plant aromas. Yet all these measures were temporary. Smoke drifted away on gusts of wind. Pomanders ran dry. Garlands wilted. By morning, the city reverted to its natural state, a tapestry of smells where cooking fires, animal stables, and human waste wove into one complex, overpowering note. Residents accepted these fleeting respites as relief rather than cure. Some city leaders sought more lasting changes. In Florence, officials mandated that all slaughterhouses operate outside the city walls and that animal carcasses be processed only in cover markets. In Bruges, merchants financed the digging of small stone-lined channels beneath main streets, hoping that a slight increase in water flow would carry waste more effectively than open gutters. These reforms, though modest, signaled a growing awareness. Sanitation was as much a matter of urban planning as a personal effort. In quiet corners, certain monasteries refined their own systems. Cistercian abbeys, for example, built latrine blocks over flowing streams diverted from nearby rivers. These covered latrines often featured stone seats arranged along a bench, with water rushing beneath to carry waste away continuously. Monks maintained these channels meticulously, using wooden rakes to prevent blockages. Their rule books specified designated times for cleaning and even prescribed hymns to sing while working to lighten the toil and sanctify the task. Despite these innovations, medieval sanitation remained an imperfect art. When braziers failed to mask the smell of a flooded gutter, or when a rainstorm washed fresh waste onto a cellar floor, citizens learned to endure. They wove their daily lives around odors, choosing routes that avoided the worst alleys, timing errands to coincide with breeze changes, and sleeping with open windows facing away from busy streets. Over time, the stench became part of the city's identity, a constant background note to which travelers and residents alike adjusted. As you listen, imagine the curl of smoke from a burning bundle of lavender, the weight of a pomander pressed lightly against fingers, the gentle rush of a concealed stream beneath a row of stone seats. Let these sensory details replace the harsher images of muck and rot. Breathe in the momentary sweetness of herb and resin. Then release, allowing your mind to drift deeper into the medieval night. Soon, we will turn our focus to the public health crises born of poor sanitation. The outbreaks of disease that shaped social policy and led, over centuries, to the modern systems we rely on today. But for now, rest in the memory of smoky air and herb-scented relief, and let your thoughts settle like petals on still water. In the aftermath of each masked respite, the city's true harmony lay in the invisible world of microbes and miasmas. Without knowledge of bacteria or viruses, medieval physicians and civic leaders believed foul air, miasma, caused disease. Yet the filth in gutters and cesspits was undeniably linked to outbreaks that tore through towns with terrifying speed. Imagine a summer when the river running through the city turns a sickly green, its banks fringed with rotting vegetation and scum. Children splash at the edge, unaware that the water, once pure, now seethes with contamination. Soon, households along its course report the first cases of dysentery, fever, violent cramps, and relentless diarrhea. Within days, dozens fall ill. Within weeks, hundreds. Neighbors avoid the sick, doors are shuttered, and simple visits become acts of bravery. Town councils convene emergency meetings. A proclamation is issued. Let no citizen draw water from the river without first allowing it to stand in clean vessels for 24 hours. Filters of woven cloth are recommended. Some magistrates order the removal of refuse piles near wells. Others mandate that chamber pots be emptied only in designated ditches. But as the disease spreads, fear overtakes compliance. Merchants abandon stalls. Churches ring their bells for prayers of deliverance. And the air itself feels heavy with dread. Larger epidemics, the plague in its various waves, demanded more drastic measures. Officials built pest houses outside the city walls where the afflicted were sent to linger or die, shut gates at sunset to enforce curfews, and posted guards to deter flight. Households with plague victims were marked with painted crosses and barred from public spaces. Watchmen patrolled streets to enforce isolation, armed with clubs and lanterns. Yet rumors circulated that the gates themselves, the main arteries for supplies, carried infection inward whenever they opened. Across Europe, responses varied. In Venice, lawmakers required that incoming ships anchor for 40 days, quarantine days, before docking. Pilots boarded vessels on secluded islands to inspect cargo and crew, ensuring no one aboard showed signs of pestilence. The term quarantine entered common parlance, rooted in this desperate attempt to protect city-states whose prosperity depended on maritime trade. In inland towns, isolation took different forms. Entire neighborhoods were walled off. Bishops and municipal leaders negotiated with local landowners to secure open fields for makeshift cemeteries. Mass graves, often simple trenches lined with straw, filled rapidly. Priests conducted hasty burials, reciting prayers over the bodies before more were lowered. The odor of decay mixed with incense and the acrid tang of lime powder, sometimes thrown over corpses in an attempt to hasten decomposition and reduce smell. Despite such horrors, some lessons emerged. After one particularly brutal outbreak, the Council of Florence commissioned detailed surveys of water sources, mapping wells, springs, and stagnant pools. They identified high-risk zones where refuse disposal was worst and mandated that new wells be dug uphill from cesspits. Pairs followed suit, requiring that all new privy pits be located at least 40 paces from any well, and that each pit be constructed with wooden planks to facilitate regular cleaning. By the late 15th century, guilds assumed roles in sanitation. Tanners, butchers, and bakers formed councils that set standards for waste disposal specific to their trades. Butchers built communal shambles outside town gates, ensuring that blood and offal drained into separate trenches, not mingled with household waste. Tanners installed settling tanks to separate solids from tanning liquors before draining the liquid into fields for irrigation. Monastic orders refined their own systems further. Cistercian abbeys, renowned for their engineering acumen, redesigned latrine blocks with continuous water flow. They built small water wheels to stir slow currents beneath seats, preventing blockages. Monks produced rule books detailing precise cleaning schedules. Every third day for latrine haulage, monthly inspections of underground channels, quarterly scouring of bathhouse basins. These manuals spread by hand across Europe, inspiring lay officials to adopt similar practices. Yet for the average citizen, change was incremental. Most still relied on simple observation. Avoid the foulest streets after rain, smell the breeze before opening a window, boil water when possible. Herbalists sold sachets of mint, pennyroyal, and agrimony, claiming they purified the air. Apothecaries mixed vinegar with oils, rose, lavender, sandalwood, and dispensed pomanders at premium prices. Wealthy patrons displayed them prominently at markets, signaling both status and fear. As centuries passed, these cumulative efforts set the stage for modern sanitation. Stone-lined sewers returned, this time built anew under Renaissance rulers who understood hydraulics. Public bathhouses re-emerged in larger towns, offering basic hygiene in exchange for a few coins. Wells were capped and sealed. New regulations mandated fresh gravel beds and brick linings. By the 17th century, physicians like John Grunt and William Petty in London began analyzing bills of mortality, correlating death rates with neighborhood sanitation conditions. But in our medieval moment, the battle against stench was fought person by person. Sip by sip of strained water, waft of incense, careful avoidance of known hotspots. These small acts of self-preservation, combined with emerging public policies, gradually improved urban health. Each scented torch, each clean cesspit, each summoned night soil collector added a layer of protection, however thin. Now, as your breathing deepens and your thoughts drift, let the memory of quarantine islands, pest houses, and lime-strewn cemeteries settle like distant echoes. Recall the hiss of filtered water spilling into a basin, the pluck of reeds woven into a makeshift sieve, the faint swirl of incense in a candlelit chapel. Soon, we will conclude our journey through medieval sanitation by reflecting on the lasting legacy of these practices, the foundations they laid for our modern world of hidden pipes, running water, and waste treatment. But for now, rest in the knowledge that even in the darkest, stinkiest corners of history, people found ways to care for one another and to survive. These early innovations, quarantines, regulated cesspits, guild-led waste controls, and monastic latrine blocks, laid the groundwork for the hidden plumbing we rely on today. Beginning in the late 15th century, rulers and engineers revisited the concept of stone-lined sewers, not as relics of Rome, but as essential arteries of urban life. New conduits were built beneath Renaissance streets, designed with gradual slopes and access points for cleaning. Builders capped open gutters with removable stone covers, creating the first true sewer lids. At the same time, the notion of drawing clean water from a protected source took hold. City planners capped public wells with wood or stone domes and installed raised pump handles to keep buckets clear of surface runoff. In Paris, the construction of covered aqueducts carried fresh spring water directly into fountain basins in central squares. Citizens filled their jugs from these flowing taps rather than exposed streams, reducing exposure to contaminated water. Bathhouses, once shunned for fear of opening the pores to miasma, enjoyed a cautious revival. Wealthy patrons paid to bathe in large, tiled pools maintained by trained attendants. Simple filtration systems, layers of sand and gravel, were used to clarify water before reuse. While full-body bathing remained a luxury, even modest homes installed wash basins fed by small lead pipes, allowing daily hand and face washing without drawing from communal sources. By the 17th century, physicians like John Grunt in London began compiling bills of mortality, records of deaths categorized by cause, and mapping them against neighborhood conditions. They noted that areas with poor drainage and overflowing cesspits suffered higher death rates. These findings spurred further reforms. London's Great Stink of 1564, when Thames pollution drove the court from the city, led to ordinances restricting privy outflows into the river. In Venice, elaborate canal gate systems were built to separate gray water from sewage, pushing waste out to sea instead of back into drinking zones. Behind the scenes, craftsmen refined materials and techniques. Clay pipes were gradually replaced by early lead and stoneware pipes, less prone to cracking and easier to seal. Brick-lined underground tunnels were constructed with arched ceilings to prevent collapse. Architects designing grand civic projects incorporated designated vault rooms beneath buildings, accessible through trapdoors for routine cleaning. These spaces, though odorous themselves, kept waste out of living quarters and away from street surfaces. Meanwhile, the public mindset shifted. No longer did people simply accept stench as an immutable part of city life. Instead, sanitation became a shared responsibility. Municipalities hired teams to inspect and maintain waste channels. Households paid fees for latrine emptying, and markets sold tools designed for sewer clearing. Apothecaries began marketing soap, vinegar washes, and scented pomades not just as luxuries, but as necessities for health. Parents taught children to rinse cups thoroughly and to carry cloth filters for cloudy water. Owners of slaughterhouses who funded sewer extensions, guilds who organized street cleaning brigades, and monks who spent cold mornings raking latrine channels so that their brothers could pray in cleaner air. As your breathing deepens and your thoughts grow still, let these images settle. The first stone lids sliding into place, water flowing through newly sealed pipes, fountains gurgling in town squares, and the faint echo of a distant cart rolling away with emptied waste. In the centuries since, these innovations evolved into the underground networks that carry water and sewage out of view, so efficient we almost never notice them. Yet it all began with people who refused to live amid unrelenting stench. Their efforts remind us that progress often emerges from the most basic needs: clean water, fresh air, and a dignified way to dispose of waste. As you drift towards sleep, carry with you the sense that even the smallest act, lining a pit with gravel, hanging a bundle of lavender, capping a well, can ripple across generations, shaping the world in ways unseen but deeply felt. Now, as the glow of our story's torches begins to fade, let your thoughts settle on the gentle pulse of progress that followed those early efforts. Imagine, for a moment, the first stone lids sliding into place over open drains, the quiet gurgle of water traveling through sealed conduits, the trickle of a newly capped well filling a bucket with clean, cold spring water. Picture small bathhouses re-emerging in cobblestone courtyards, steam rising from tiled pools as attendants ladle warm water for weary bodies. Think of clusters of children clustered by a public fountain, cupping clean water in their hands. Water drawn not from filth-choked gutters, but from protected aqueducts snaking in from distant hills. These changes unfolded slowly, district by district, decade by decade. In one neighborhood, a master mason laid the first clay pipe in a narrow trench. In another, a guild funded the clearing of a long-neglected sewer. Monks in silent cloisters perfected latrine blocks fed by rushing streams. Artisans dipped their brushes in vinegar and rosemary, painting crosses on plague-marked doors to signal hope amid despair. Each of these small acts, each laid brick, each raked channel, each head of lavender hung above a doorway, added a brick to the foundation of modern sanitation. And yet, for all their ingenuity, medieval people never fully banished the stench. They learned instead to live alongside it, to carve out moments of relief in smoky halls and fragrant cloisters, to weave rituals of cleansing into daily life. They taught that clean water, tended drains, and simple hygiene were not luxuries, but necessities. Lessons that echo to our own moment every time we turn on a tap or flush a toilet without a second thought. Now, shift your focus inward. Feel the steady rise and fall of your chest. Notice the soft rhythm of your breathing. With each exhale, release the weight of the day. With each inhale, draw in calm and rest. Allow the memory of those medieval streets, their gutters and gardens, their baths and braziers, to become a gentle backdrop to your own peaceful night. Before we close our book on medieval sanitation, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Progress often begins not with grand discoveries, but with small choices. Choosing to line a pit with gravel, to hang a bundle of hyssop by a door, to gather in a guild hall and agree on better rules for waste. What small choice will you carry into tomorrow? Perhaps it will be as simple as filling a glass of water before bed, washing your hands with care, or noting something you're grateful for tonight. Carry that question with you as you drift off. Let your mind wander through stone-lined tunnels, torchlit chambers, and scented halls, Then find yourself once more in the quiet comfort of your own room. As sleep gathers you in, rest in the knowledge that every drop of water, every hidden pipe, and every clean breath is part of a long story. One that began in the muddy alleys of medieval Europe and continues with each of us today. Sleep well and good night.